In the grand candlelit halls of a centuries-old cathedral, two titans of thought collide, one a guardian of faith, the other a visionary of reason. Before an audience hanging on their every word, Pope Francis and Elon Musk engage in a battle of ideology, questioning the very foundations of belief, progress, and the purpose of existence itself. What begins as a clash of intellects soon unravels into something far deeper, forcing them both to confront the limits of their own understanding. The air inside the cathedral was thick with anticipation. The vast chamber, bathed in the warm glow of flickering candlelight, seemed to hold its breath as hundreds of eyes settled upon the two men seated at the grand stone table before the altar. Outside, the city hummed with life, unaware that within these sacred walls a conversation was about to unfold that could shake the very notions of faith, reason, and what it meant to be human. Pope Francis sat with an air of quiet certainty, his weathered hands resting on the table before him, the weight of centuries of religious doctrine behind his gaze. Opposite him, Elon Musk leaned forward slightly, his sharp mind already calculating, ready to challenge the very foundation upon which faith stood. The contrast between them could not have been greater. One a shepherd of souls, draped in flowing white robes, a symbol of tradition and devotion. The other a pioneer of technology and space exploration, clad in modern simplicity, his presence electric with the energy of forward momentum. The murmurs of the crowd faded into silence as the discussion began. From the very first words exchanged, it was clear that this was no ordinary debate. Musk wasted no time in addressing the core of his argument. To him, belief in God was a relic of a less enlightened time, an outdated concept that had been carried forward through history out of fear and ignorance. Humanity, he argued, had advanced beyond the need for such belief. Science had unraveled the mysteries of the universe, pushing back the darkness of superstition. The world no longer needed divine explanations. It needed logic, innovation, and progress. The Pope, however, was unmoved by Musk's challenge. He listened with the patience of a man who had heard such arguments before, his expression one of quiet understanding rather than confrontation. Faith, he countered, was not a thing to be proven or quantified. It was something felt in the spaces between people, in the love that bound them together, in the sacrifices made for others, and in the resilience of the human spirit. It was not about explaining the universe. It was about finding meaning within it. Musk's skepticism sharpened. If faith was merely a feeling, an emotional response to the unknown, then wasn't it just a psychological crutch? He had spent his life chasing certainty, solving problems, and building things that could be measured and tested. Faith, by its very nature, resisted such scrutiny. What good was a belief that could not be proven? The Pope met Musk's intensity with an unwavering gaze. Faith was not about proof. It was about presence. It was in the unseen forces that guided people toward compassion, in the mysteries of human connection, in the profound experience of love that defied explanation. Did Musk not, in his own way, believe in something greater? Did he not look up at the stars and see more than just physics? For the first time, Musk hesitated. He had spent countless nights staring into the abyss of space, imagining futures beyond Earth, seeking answers in the infinite void. He had seen the wonders of the universe up close, yet he had never stopped to ask what lay beyond the reach of science. The thought unsettled him. The tension in the cathedral thickened, the energy shifting from intellectual combat to something more profound. Musk's confidence had not wavered, but a crack had appeared, a question he had not expected to ask himself. The Pope sensed it too, and he did not press. He simply let the silence settle between them, a silence that, for once, Musk did not rush to fill. The audience sat frozen, caught between two worlds, the relentless drive of progress and the quiet pull of faith. The air itself felt charged, as if the walls of the cathedral had absorbed centuries of similar debates and now bore witness to yet another. But the night was far from over. This was not just a debate. This was a reckoning. And the deeper they ventured into the heart of their discussion, the more they would come to realize that the answers they sought were not as simple as either had imagined. The silence in the cathedral stretched, heavy and charged, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of history's great debates and were now bearing witness to yet another. The audience remained fixed in place, their breath caught between the words yet to be spoken. Musk sat back, his fingers lightly tapping against the stone table, his mind racing. He had faced formidable intellectual opponents before, scientists, politicians, engineers who questioned his vision for the future. But this was different. The Pope was not arguing numbers or probabilities. He was not swayed by data points or technological advancements. His confidence was not rooted in logic, yet it was unshakable. Musk found himself searching for an angle of attack, an argument that would shatter the foundation of faith itself, but he could not deny the way Francis spoke, not as a man defending a crumbling institution, but as someone who had already made peace with the unknown. "I understand progress," the Pope finally said, his voice calm but firm. "But tell me, what is its purpose?" Musk frowned. The question was deceptively simple. Progress was about survival, about pushing humanity beyond its limitations, about ensuring the species could persist long after the Earth had become inhospitable. It was about breaking free of the constraints that had shackled civilization for centuries, outdated traditions, irrational fears, and yes, religious dogma that had slowed scientific discovery for far too long. But the Pope leaned forward, his gaze sharp beneath the soft glow of candlelight. "You build rockets to escape Earth. You strive to colonize other planets. You push the boundaries of artificial intelligence, seeking to extend human potential beyond what is natural. But to what end?" His voice did not rise, but it carried the weight of something far greater than mere words. If you remove faith from the equation, if you strip away all belief in something greater than ourselves, what do you have left? What drives a man like you to care about the survival of humanity at all? The question struck Musk harder than he anticipated. He opened his mouth, then closed it, feeling the stares of the audience pressing in on him. For the first time in the discussion, the momentum had shifted. He had always seen himself as a pragmatist, a problem solver, someone who looked at the challenges of the world and found ways to overcome them. Faith had never played a role in his calculations. But now, in the stillness of the cathedral, he felt the full weight of the question settle upon him. What was the purpose of all this? What was he truly trying to accomplish? He exhaled, shifting in his seat. "The survival of humanity is the only rational goal," he said, his voice measured but edged with something deeper. "Everything else is secondary. It's not about belief, it's about ensuring that consciousness itself continues to exist beyond Earth." The Pope did not look away. "And what do you believe consciousness is?" Musk's brows knitted together. "It's an emergent property of the brain, a highly complex system of neurons firing in ways we don't fully understand yet. But ultimately, it's a byproduct of evolution. There's no divine hand in it." Francis's lips pressed into a small, knowing smile. "And yet you dedicate your life to preserving it," Musk inhaled sharply, his frustration flickering. "Because it matters," he snapped. "Because our ability to think, to create, to innovate, that's what makes us different from any other species. It's what allows us to transcend." "Transcend what?" The words cut through the air like a knife. Musk felt a strange sensation in his chest, a flicker of something he didn't quite recognize. He had spent his life pushing the boundaries of human potential, searching for answers in science, in engineering, in the vast cold reaches of space. But transcendence? That was not a word he used. The Pope saw the hesitation and pressed forward, his voice softer now but no less powerful. "You say there is no divine presence, no higher meaning. But even you, Elon, cannot escape the fact that you are searching for something. If life is only biology, if consciousness is merely a mechanical function of the brain, then why does it haunt us so? Why do we dream beyond what we need for survival? Why do we long for purpose? Musk clenched his jaw, but he did not look away. The tension in the cathedral was almost unbearable now. The audience sat spellbound, watching as two of the most influential minds of the modern age faced off over the very essence of existence. The Pope sat back slightly, allowing his words to settle. You chase the stars, hoping to find new worlds. But have you ever stopped to ask why? Musk's fingers curled into a fist. Because we have to. Or because you are afraid of what happens if we don't. The words sent a shiver through Musk's spine. He had spent his life running toward the future, pushing humanity forward with relentless force. He had built entire industries, reshaped economies, revolutionized space travel, all with a singular vision, progress at any cost. But had he ever considered what he was running from? He glanced around the cathedral, taking in the ancient stone, the solemn statues that had stood for centuries. Faith had endured despite everything, despite science, despite war, despite human suffering. There was something about it, something he had never fully considered. The Pope studied him closely, reading the conflict in his face. You may not believe in God, he said, his voice almost a whisper now. But tell me, do you believe in love? The question lingered in the air like smoke. Musk exhaled, feeling an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. Love, the one force that defied calculation, that could not be reduced to equations or logic. The thing that made people sacrifice, that made them endure, that made life worth preserving at all. He had never spoken about it publicly, but he knew its power. He had seen it in the eyes of his children, in the way people fought for those they cared about. He had felt it in moments he never discussed, moments of loss, of triumph, of quiet solitude staring up at the stars, wondering if there was something more. For the first time in the discussion, Musk did not have an immediate answer. The Pope did not push further. He simply sat back, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. The audience was silent, hanging on the edge of an unseen precipice, and Musk, for all his brilliance, for all his certainty, suddenly found himself standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. The silence in the cathedral was unlike any Musk had ever experienced. It wasn't emptiness, it was weight, a presence, something lingering just beyond the reach of his understanding. The audience, the grandeur of the ancient walls, the flickering candlelight, it all felt like it had been arranged for this singular moment. He was not a man prone to introspection, not in the way the Pope was, but something in him stirred, something deeply unsettling. For all the technological revolutions he had led, for all the barriers he had broken, he had never once been forced to question the essence of human existence in such a raw and intimate way. He had spent years dismissing faith as an outdated construct, a coping mechanism for those who feared uncertainty. Yet here he was, locked in a battle of minds with the most powerful religious figure on earth. And for the first time, he was struggling to find his footing. The Pope studied him carefully, sensing the disruption in his opponent's thoughts. He was not seeking victory in this debate. This was not a contest to be won. It was a conversation that Musk had perhaps never allowed himself to have. You believe in love, the Pope had said. The words still echoed in Musk's mind. His own heart pounded slightly faster than he cared to admit. It was not a question of intelligence. It was something more primal, something that logic could not easily dissect. He exhaled sharply, forcing himself to regain control. Love, he said at last, his voice measured, calculated. Love is biochemical, a reaction triggered by evolutionary imperatives, a means to ensure survival, to form social bonds, to propagate the species. The Pope did not react immediately. His face remained patient, unreadable, As if he had heard this answer before, 1,000 times over, Musk continued, pressing forward, needing to reclaim the certainty that had begun to waver. It's a series of neural signals: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, chemicals firing in the brain to create an illusion of connection. The Pope finally spoke, his voice gentle but piercing. Then why does it hurt when it is lost? The question struck deeper than Musk anticipated. He had seen the logical explanations for grief, for heartbreak. He had read the studies, analyzed the data. Yet no chart or brain scan had ever truly captured what it felt like. He had known loss. He had felt the ache of things slipping through his fingers. If love was merely biochemical, then why did its absence feel like something missing from the soul? The Pope leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on Musk, with an intensity that made the air feel heavier. We explain many things with science, but there are some things we only understand through experience. Love is not proven, it is felt, just as faith is not proven, but known. Musk's jaw tightened. He had spent his entire life rejecting this line of reasoning. Just because something was felt didn't mean it was real. Human perception was flawed. Illusions, cognitive biases, the tricks of the mind. These were well-documented phenomena, and yet he had been staring into the abyss of space for years, searching for something beyond Earth, beyond the constraints of the human condition. But what if what he was looking for was not out there? What if the real frontier, the real mystery, was something far closer? The thought disturbed him more than he was willing to admit. The Pope, sensing the turmoil in Musk's silence, pressed forward. You search for purpose in the stars, but purpose is not found in distance. It is found in presence, in connection, in knowing that we are part of something greater than ourselves. Musk exhaled, his frustration flickering back to the surface. That's an easy thing to say when your entire existence is built on belief, but belief doesn't change reality. Neither does denying it, the Pope countered, his voice unwavering. Musk sat back, his hands tightening into fists. The Pope was turning his own logic against him, and it was working. He wasn't used to being the one on the defensive, but this wasn't a battle he could win with data, with arguments of probability. It was something far more elusive. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if he had the right answer. The audience remained deathly silent, caught in the tension that crackled between them. No one had expected Musk to falter, not like this. He had built his reputation on unshakable confidence, on his ability to tear down arguments with ruthless precision. Yet here, in the dim glow of the cathedral, surrounded by the weight of centuries, he found himself facing a question that even he was not prepared to answer. What was the purpose of it all? He had always believed that the answer lay in the future, in pushing forward, in solving the problems that others deemed impossible. But now, sitting across from a man who had built his life around something Musk had always dismissed as myth, he found himself staring at a different kind of impossibility. The Pope had no evidence, no empirical data, no equations to back up his claims. And yet he was completely at peace. Musk, for all his brilliance, for all his achievements, could not say the same. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. The Pope tilted his head slightly, watching him closely. Elon, you have spent your life looking outward. But tell me, when was the last time you looked inward? The words settled over him like a weight. He wanted to respond immediately, to argue, to push back. But something inside him hesitated, because he wasn't sure he had an answer. The realization sent an uncomfortable ripple through his mind. He had built rockets, revolutionized industries, redefined what humanity was capable of. But he had never once truly stopped to ask himself why, not in this way. The Pope watched him, waiting. There was no victory in his eyes, no arrogance in his tone, only patience, understanding. As if he had seen this before, brilliant minds confronted. With something they could not measure, could not control, Musk's heart pounded, His mind raced. For the first time in his life, he felt as though he was standing at the edge of a void, not of space, not of time, but of something far more personal, and he did not know what lay on the other side. The cathedral seemed to shrink around him, the air pressing against his skin with a weight he could not define. Elon Musk had been in many high-stakes moments before. Boardroom battles, government hearings, public scrutiny that could break most men. But this was something else. This wasn't about profit margins or technological breakthroughs. This was about something he had spent his entire life avoiding, the nature of his own existence. The Pope sat quietly, his gaze unshaken, waiting. He was not pressuring Musk to answer, nor did he need to. The question had already done its damage. It lingered in the vastness of Musk's mind, spreading like a virus through his carefully constructed worldview. When was the last time he had truly looked inward? His instinct was to dismiss it, to claim that self-reflection was a luxury of those who had time to waste. He had always believed that action, not contemplation, shaped the world. The people who changed history were the ones who built, who created, who pushed forward without hesitation. But now, under the weight of the Pope's quiet certainty, he felt something foreign creeping in. Doubt, not about science, not about reason, but about whether those things alone could sustain a human soul. The audience held their breath, sensing the moment of unraveling. They had come expecting a battle of intellects, a collision of two titanic figures who embodied the opposing forces of faith and reason. But this was no longer about winning. This was about something much deeper. Musk exhaled sharply, forcing himself back into control. His mind, ever analytical, seized onto a counterpoint, something solid to grasp before the ground beneath him gave way completely. Faith has led to as much destruction as it has to meaning, he said at last, his voice even, but carrying an edge. For centuries, religion dictated the world's laws, controlled governments, and waged wars in its name. The idea that faith brings peace, history proves otherwise. A murmur rippled through the audience. This was a familiar argument, one that had been hurled at the church for generations. It was an accusation that carried weight. The Pope did not flinch. Faith is not what wages war, he said simply. Fear does. Musk narrowed his eyes. The Pope continued, when faith is corrupted, when it is used as a tool for power rather than a path to understanding, it ceases to be faith. But the same can be said of reason. Science, in the wrong hands, has led to destruction. Weapons that can erase entire cities, experiments that robbed people of their humanity. The mind, just like the soul, can be twisted. Musk felt his jaw tighten. He knew the history well. He had always prided himself on using technology to push humanity forward, not to destroy. But he also knew that every great discovery could be turned into a weapon. Nuclear energy had given birth to bombs. AI, which he both pioneered and feared, had the potential to end civilization if placed in reckless hands. The Pope leaned forward, slightly. So I ask you, Elon, if both science and faith can be corrupted, then what is it that truly guides us? Musk hesitated. His mind raced through possible answers, logic, ethics, the pursuit of knowledge, but none of them felt whole. Because for all of his achievements, for all of his brilliance, he knew that logic alone had never been enough to hold civilization together. He had spent his life trying to solve the world's problems, trying to ensure the survival of humanity at all costs. But was survival enough? If humans reached Mars, if AI reached singularity, if civilization expanded into the cosmos, then what? What was it all for? He exhaled sharply, shifting in his seat. Humanity has to move forward. He said, more to himself than to the Pope. We can't stay stagnant. The Pope nodded, his expression unreadable. And yet, even as you push forward, you are haunted by something. A question you have never allowed yourself to fully confront. Musk bristled. He did not like being read. "What is it that you are truly seeking?" the Pope asked. The question landed like a thunderclap. Musk had always assumed that his search for progress was about practicality, ensuring survival, expanding human potential. But now, under the weight of the Pope's unwavering gaze, he felt something shift inside him, an uncomfortable gnawing realization. What was he chasing? Was it merely survival, or was it something deeper? He thought of the nights he had spent staring at the stars, feeling something stir in his chest that he could never quite define. He had always dismissed it as wonder, as curiosity. But what if it was something more? What if, despite everything, he had been searching for something beyond numbers and equations, something he could not name? His fingers clenched against the stone table. He hated this feeling, this uncertainty. It was easier when he could see the road ahead, when everything had a solution. But now, in the vast silence of the cathedral, he felt exposed, vulnerable. The Pope saw it. He did not press, did not force an answer. He simply waited, because he knew he had seen this moment before in others, the moment where certainty cracked, where the mind was forced to confront something it could not explain. Musk swallowed hard. He had spent his life bending reality to his will, breaking through barriers that others believed unbreakable. But here, in this ancient cathedral, he had found something he could not control, something that frightened him. The Pope finally spoke, his voice softer now. "You do not have to answer now, but you must ask yourself, what happens when you reach the end of the stars, and the question still remains?" Musk's breath caught in his chest. The cathedral was silent. The audience watched, knowing they were witnessing something far greater than a debate. Musk sat motionless, staring at the man before him, realizing for the first time in his life that he did not have the answer, and that, perhaps, was the most terrifying realization of all. The weight of the Pope's words settled into the silence like an inescapable force, pressing against Musk's mind with an intensity he could not ignore. For years he had lived by the certainty of logic, of numbers, of facts that could be measured and tested. Now, for the first time, he found himself staring into a void that no equation could solve. He had faced uncertainty before, in the early phases, days of SpaceX, when rockets exploded on the launch pad, in Tesla's near bankruptcy, when the world mocked his vision. In every impossible challenge he had ever taken on, he had found a way forward. But this was different. This wasn't about a problem to be fixed. This was about something he had spent his entire life avoiding: purpose. The Pope did not speak further. He let the silence stretch, let Musk sit in the discomfort of his own thoughts. He had seen this moment before, not in debates, not in public forums, but in men who had come to him in private, carrying the same unspoken weight in their eyes. Musk's fingers tapped absently against the table. His mind searched for an escape, a way to reassert control. If he could turn the conversation back to science, to reason, he could break free of whatever grip this moment had on him. But no words came. Instead, memories flickered through his mind, unbidden. The first time he had looked up at the night sky as a child, feeling something he could not explain. The night spent alone in thought, staring out at the vastness of space, searching for an answer he never quite found. The way he had buried himself in work, in projects, in progress, always moving, always pushing forward, as if standing still would force him to confront something he wasn't ready to face. He exhaled sharply, forcing himself to meet the Pope's gaze again. "If I accept that faith has meaning," he said at last, his voice measured but tense. "Then what does that change?" The Pope's expression remained calm, unreadable. "That is not for me to say." Musk frowned. "Then why push me toward the question?" A small smile flickered across the Pope's lips. "Because you are already asking it." The words hit like a pulse of electricity through Musk's spine. He wanted to push back, to deny it, to reclaim his ground, but deep down, he knew The Pope wasn't leading him anywhere. He had already started walking on his own. The realization unsettled him more than he could admit. He had always seen himself as a man of clarity, of control. He shaped the world, not the other way around. Yet here he was, grappling with something intangible, something that refused to be dissected and understood. He leaned back slightly, exhaling. Through his nose. "I don't believe in an afterlife," he said finally. "I don't believe there's some divine plan guiding us." The Pope nodded, unbothered. "Then what do you believe?" Musk hesitated. The answer should have been easy. He had spent his entire life articulating it. Humanity must progress, must push forward, must expand beyond its limitations. But now, sitting in this ancient cathedral, those words felt hollow, incomplete. What did he believe? His lips parted, then closed. The Pope did not press. He simply watched, waiting. Musk looked down at his hands. His fingers curled slightly, as if grasping for something just beyond reach. He had never been a man of faith. He had never needed to be. But here, in the depths of this conversation, he felt something unfamiliar. Not belief, not certainty, but something just as powerful. The question had taken root, and it was not going away. He inhaled sharply, shaking his head slightly as if to clear the fog of his thoughts. "I don't know," he admitted, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. The Pope nodded, the gentlest acknowledgment of a battle that had already been won, not a victory over Musk, but a victory within him. "There is no shame in uncertainty," the Pope said, "only in refusing to face it." Musk's jaw tightened. The old part of him, the part that thrived on confidence and control, rebelled against the words. But something deeper, something unspoken, knew they were true. The audience was silent, hanging on every breath, every flicker of tension in Musk's posture. They had come expecting a battle of ideologies, a confrontation between faith and reason. But what they had witnessed was something far more powerful. A man who had spent his life chasing the future had finally been forced to confront the present. Musk exhaled, shaking his head once more, as if laughing at himself. "I didn't expect this conversation to go this way," the Pope smiled. "Neither did I." A murmur of soft laughter rippled through the audience, breaking the tension just enough for the moment to breathe. But Musk was not finished. His mind was still racing, still searching for something solid. "If faith has value," he said, choosing his words carefully, "then what is its purpose? What does it do that reason cannot?" The Pope did not hesitate. "It allows us to see beyond ourselves." Musk frowned. "Explain." The Pope gestured around them to the grand cathedral, to the faces in the crowd. "Look at those around you. Every person here has a story, a struggle, a hope that cannot be measured. Faith is not about rules or institutions or rituals. It is about connection. It is about the force that binds us together, that compels us to love, to sacrifice, to find meaning in something greater than ourselves." Musk's fingers tapped against the table once more. He was thinking, deeply, intensely. The Pope continued, his voice steady. "Science will take us to the stars, but it is love that will ensure we do not go alone." Musk exhaled slowly. He had spent years planning humanity's future beyond Earth, yet he had always spoken in terms of survival, of necessity, of expansion. He had never truly considered, what would happen if humanity reached the stars, but lost itself along the way. He had always dismissed faith as outdated. But was it possible, just possible, that faith was not about answers, but about the questions themselves? About the force that drove people to keep searching, to keep hoping, to keep believing in something beyond mere existence? The thought sent another ripple of unease through him. He was not a man who entertained uncertainty, but now, for the first time in his life, he was beginning to wonder if uncertainty was where true meaning was found. The cathedral was silent once. More, the weight of the conversation pressing in. Musk met the Pope's gaze, and for the first time, he did not feel like an opponent. He felt like a student standing at the edge of something vast, something unknowable, something terrifying, and perhaps, just perhaps, something profoundly beautiful. A hush had fallen over the cathedral, deeper than before. It was the kind of silence that carried meaning, the kind that lingered not in absence but in presence. The weight of the discussion had transformed the air, thick with something unspoken, something felt in the marrow of those who bore witness. Elon Musk, the man who had dedicated his life to forging the future, sat motionless, his thoughts tangled in a web of contradictions. He had come to this conversation armed with reason, with facts, with the certainty that faith was nothing more than a relic of the past, a construct built to soothe those too afraid to face the cold indifference of the universe. And yet, for the first time in his life, he was beginning to wonder if the universe was indifferent at all. The Pope had not sought to defeat him. He had not sought to convert or convince. He had merely opened a door, one that Musk had never been willing to walk through. But now the door was ajar, and no matter how much he tried, he could not unsee what lay beyond. His gaze drifted toward the towering stained-glass windows of the cathedral, where moonlight filtered through depictions of centuries-old saints, of sacrifices and triumphs, of moments of despair that had given birth to hope. He had never paid attention to such things before. But now, sitting in the aftermath of a battle of ideas that had turned into something far more personal, he saw them differently. They were not symbols of blind belief. They were symbols of longing, of something greater than survival. He thought of humanity's first steps into the unknown, the great explorers who had set sail without knowing if they would return. They had not been driven by data, by pure logic alone. They had been driven by something else, faith. Not faith in God necessarily, but faith in meaning. Faith that there was something worth reaching for, something unseen, yet deeply felt. The Pope watched him, his face calm but knowing. He had seen this struggle before, the war between the mind and the soul. It was a war that many brilliant men fought, unwilling to surrender to the idea that not everything could be understood, that some things simply had to be lived. Musk exhaled slowly. His entire life had been about moving forward, about pushing humanity toward something greater. But now, for the first time, he considered that perhaps humanity's greatest challenge was not just reaching the stars, but ensuring that when they got there, they had not lost themselves in the process. What if I never find the answer? He said suddenly, his voice quieter than before. The Pope smiled, a sadness behind his eyes. Then you will be exactly where you are meant to be. Musk frowned. How can you say that? Because the search is the answer, the Pope said. Because meaning is not found at the end of a journey, it is found in the journey itself. The words cut through Musk's mind with a force he had not expected. He had spent his entire life chasing after something just beyond his grasp, convinced that the answer lay in the next breakthrough, the next innovation, the next frontier. But what if meaning had never been something to be discovered? What if it was something to be lived? A shiver ran through him. The thought terrified him because it meant that no amount of progress would ever bring closure. There would always be something more, something unanswered, something unknown. And for the first time, he did not hate that idea. For the first time, he saw beauty in it. The Pope nodded slightly, as if sensing the shift within Musk's mind. He did not press further. He did not need to. The question had been planted, and it would grow in its own time. Musk sat back, staring down at his hands. They had built rockets, had designed the future, had created machines that reshaped the world. And yet, the most powerful thing he had ever encountered was not something he could hold, not something he could measure. It was the unknown. The audience remained still, their faces reflecting the gravity of what had transpired. They had expected a clash of titans, a battle between faith and reason, between the old world and the new. But what they had witnessed was something far greater. Not a victory, a transformation. Musk inhaled deeply, his thoughts still a storm of contradictions, but his heart was quiet. For the first time in his life he was at peace with not knowing, and, perhaps, that was the closest thing to faith he had ever felt. The Pope stood slowly, the folds of his white robes shifting in the candlelight. He looked at Musk with a softness that carried no expectation, only understanding. "There is no final answer, Elon," he said, "only the search and the love we find along the way." Musk exhaled one last time, nodding slightly. He did not agree fully. Not yet. But he understood, and that was enough. He rose from his seat, his presence still commanding, but something in his posture had changed. The audience, still mesmerized, remained silent as the two men turned toward the grand doors of the cathedral. The conversation had ended, but its echo would linger for years to come. The great mind of technology had met the great heart of faith, and though neither had won, neither had lost, because in the end they had both arrived at the same place, not at certainty, but at something far greater, at wonder. And as Musk stepped into the cool night air, staring up at the vast, endless sky, he felt it, something he could not name, something just beyond his understanding, something like faith, and, for the first time in his life, he did not look away.